So how do you confront manipulative behavior and still remain empathetic? Well, a big part of this is not just seeing the pattern, but understanding the story behind it. Now, it would be very nice if we could just be righteously indignant and recognize manipulative behavior, and everyone could see how toxic and poison it was and how evil it was. But that's rarely the situation. What it does look more like is sort of repeated bad behavior in, last-minute crises, or some kind of, emotional turmoil to avoid accountability. It could even be playing coworkers against each other or weaponizing vulnerability in order to avoid responsibility. Now, if you only look at the story, well, you could feel some pity and you might get caught up in that. But it's understanding the pattern and the story that leads to the greatest wisdom. So understand the emotion and the story without excusing the behavior.
Show me wax on, wax off.
So how would you do this? Well, you need to have empathy. Empathy is not the problem, but you also need to have boundaries. You need to have accountability. You need to have consequences, and that's where it very often falls down. So let me give you a framework for understanding that. So step one might sound a little bit soft, but it is to validate emotion by saying something like, I can hear this has been stressful for you. And that's a good part of just general listening. Don't come in with a preconceived notion, a preconceived nail that you want to hammer into this person. Genuinely listen to them. It doesn't mean you have to believe them. It doesn't mean you have to accommodate them, but at least know what you're really dealing with. Second, name what is going on explicitly. Over the last 3 weeks, you've been late 3 times, and now this deadline has come up, and you're only informing me, 5 minutes after the deadline was supposed to be delivered. So not emotional, but very factual and delivered in a non-judgmental way. This is really hard to do because you're right and this person is wrong, but still resist that because sometimes you do get a little bit wrong. Sometimes there are extenuating circumstances. Sometimes there is a misunderstanding. And again, by listening to these people very carefully, you can make sure that what you're reacting to is not the evil story in your head, but what is actually happening on the ground. The third step is separating emotion from action. So back to number one, I understand the pressure and the emotion that you have around that, and it needs to change. So that leads to number 4, which is put that boundary out there. So you might say something like, going forward from today, anytime that you think you might miss a deadline or go over by 5 minutes, you need to flag that to me in advance. No exceptions. And you can give them a path forward. That's step number 5, and say, this is up to you. I'm here to help you, but the responsibility remains with you. What we're really looking for here is that we keep the relationship intact while also keeping our standards intact. And most people are going to respond to this pretty well. People do like to have clarity. It's why we give rules to children. Children that have very clear rules are much more healthy, much more sort of mentally and socially and emotionally healthy than kids who don't really have that many rules. People respond very badly to ambiguity and emotion. Anytime I, as a parent who have, maybe I've come in with some ambiguous idea or some ambiguous demand and done it with emotion, which I may have done once or twice, kids don't really respond well to that. And of course, we want to have some kind of technique here that people should generally respond well to. So acknowledge feelings, describe behavior objectively, and set expectations without anger. In this way, you should remove excuses, you should remove any confusion that there might be, and hopefully, this will remove the manipulative pattern. So many people who have taken my workshops have heard me drone on about behavior follows structure. And so giving people the structure, giving people the right patterns and the right policies, the right rules, can lead to the actual right kind of behaviors. Very often, when you've got somebody who is a bit of a problem, you should not look at the person first. Very often you should look at the structure first and then the person. And as you take a look at that person, you'll see who's healthy, because healthy people, they rise to boundaries. In the beginning, they might be a little bit like, but they rise to, you put a boundary up there, you put a goal out there, you say, hey, this is the playing field. If you're playing on this field, then we're good. Healthy people will rise to the occasion. And if they don't, well, unhealthy patterns will be really exposed by this same clarity of structure and policies and procedures and goals.
Oi. Look, I always look, I.
So as a final takeaway, empathy is a strength, but confrontation is a part of empathy, and learning how to do it well without getting a bunch of emotion involved in it or ambiguous ideas or thinking people are evil. Wow, that's really something that leads to mature leadership. You can care deeply about someone and still say, this has got to change. That's how teams stay healthy. That's how people and relationships stay healthy. And that's how you will keep your company healthy, by protecting people, but also the standards and goals and strategies that you have. And so if you think your company or your department might benefit from a workshop like this on wise empathy, well, get in contact with me and we'll see if this is right for you. And until the next time, take care.